And just before you start, for the record, for all the commenters out there, he definitely skips leg day.
I'm with my good friend Johnny Harris. So Johnny Harris has been here 12 years in Vietnam. He's a legend around these parts. We've known each other for a long time.
I'm going to be so awkward at the start, and then it's going to get...
I gotta remember my intro. Today we're going to cover a bunch of topics. How he ended up here, why he's decided to stay so long, how he picked up the Vietnamese language. So Johnny speaks almost fluent Vietnamese. He probably wouldn't agree with that, but he's pretty much the best that I've seen in real life. So we got lots of stuff to cover. So Johnny, how we doing? It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Good to see you back in sunny Hanoi.
Yeah, cheers for meeting me. It's freezing. We're in Hanoi. So if you don't know, if you're new to the channel, I lived in Hanoi for 4 years when I first moved to Vietnam. Now I've been in Da Nang for 2 years. But I'm back in Hanoi this weekend. There's a huge event happening this weekend in Hanoi. So Johnny, what's going on this weekend?
This weekend is the Hanoi Tens Festival. So a little bit of social rugby going on, but also more kind of festival vibes. We've got a couple of DJs playing through the afternoon. We have a lot of people coming down, so I'm excited.
So it's going to be a huge party, international rugby tournament. Johnny and I played rugby together in Hanoi for more than 4 years. We'll both be playing in the tournament this weekend, except for different teams this time.
And I don't skip leg day.
So we've got a lot to get into. Johnny is actually a huge part of the movement that's happening in Vietnam right now. If you don't know anything about rugby, this will still be pretty interesting. The sport of rugby is growing huge in Vietnam. So it's obviously a lot of foreigners are playing rugby in Vietnam, but we're trying to expose the game to the local people. And Johnny's having a huge part in spreading rugby in Vietnam and around Asia. So we'll get into that a little bit. Let's start with Johnny, how did you end up in Vietnam to begin with?
I was in university and I was studying English literature. I always knew I wanted to be in education, and the only thing I liked other than sport was English. So I decided to do English. Anyway, I knew that I didn't want to be in the classroom immediately after I graduated because I was still quite young. And I wanted to travel, I wanted to explore, I wanted to do all these romantic things of exploration and all this kind of stuff. So I decided to get a little bit of experience in the classroom and also do a little bit of traveling at the same time. So I decided to do TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language. And I had 4 different countries as options to choose on this like internship kind of thing, is what they called it. Poland, Thailand, China, or Vietnam. Poland is too similar to Scotland for me, so I wasn't interested. Thailand, I knew a bunch of people who'd been to Thailand and they just partied all the time, and I wasn't really looking for that kind of vibe. And I still don't like to do what everyone else is doing. I want it to be different. China, I wasn't too keen on either at the time, and I didn't know much about Vietnam either. So I just chose Vietnam because it was the furthest thing away from Scotland and total unknown for me, you know.
And how old were you when you first got here?
21.
21.
21 and a half.
Young boy.
Yeah.
Okay, so you came to Vietnam, you thought you'd check it out.
Yeah.
Surely you didn't think you would be here 12 years, right?
It's funny, no, definitely not 12 years. I bought a one-way ticket, so there was like open-ended and I could come back whenever I wanted. The contract was like 5 months. And okay, go and travel around Vietnam for 5 months and come back. And I loved being here. I loved being in Hanoi, and I wasn't ready to go back to Scotland. So here we I just extended, found a really good opportunity with an international NGO. And so that kind of set me on this path as to like where I am now.
You started off as an English teacher for a little while.
Yeah.
And then pretty quickly you got involved with the NGO and explain what that was about.
Yeah, so I knew very quickly. I started off, doing what most people do, is teaching English in like centers and in public schools and all this kind of stuff. Quite a common thing to do. But I knew really quickly that wasn't the type of education environment I wanted to be in, because I didn't feel like it suited the way that I wanted to help and educate other people, if that makes sense. And so I looked for other opportunities to move away from the classroom, where I felt like quite confined as an educator, you know. I was quite lucky at the time I was really new within the rugby club in Hanoi called the Hanoi Dragons, still a member and a player there to this day. The president at the time, he used to live in Laos, and he connected me with the director of a new sport for development program that started in Laos and was then at that point starting up in Vietnam. And they were looking for people who knew rugby, who were, had a sort of education, learning background and could work with young people. And I went down to volunteer with them, and because I'm a rugby player and it made sense to get involved. Did a bit of volunteering with them, kind of coach training. Then an opportunity came up for a project that they were running, and I was lucky enough to be selected for that role, doing a little bit of project work with the project and learning and training, but also around safeguarding and sport as well, because I'd worked with kids in sport back in Scotland when I was younger. And so I did that for about 8 years, almost 8 years.
That was Pass It Back, right?
Pass It Back was the original name, and then it changed to Child Fund Rugby. So you might see now Child Fund Rugby is the social impact partner for World Rugby. So you'll see their logo around all the different World Rugby events, Sevens Series, World Cup. And so they work in partnership with World Rugby to do social impact.
It's a big organization based around rugby, which we both love.
Yep.
Basically traveling, it was all over Asia, right?
Yeah.
So when I first met Johnny, he was doing this job, and you'd barely see him ever. Like, he was just in and out of town, back and forth.
Yeah.
Oh, I just came back from Laos. I just came back from
Yeah.
Malaysia.
Yeah.
You've been around rugby
My whole life.
in all these countries, kind of developing in nature, and so that has a big impact on what you're doing now here in Vietnam.
Yeah.
We'll get into that in a little bit. You could have went back to Scotland at any time. Why did you decide to continue to stay in Vietnam? Like, what kept you here? What made you keep wanting to stick around?
I just felt, and I still feel this to this day, I think about it quite a lot actually. I feel like Hanoi in particular, I don't have a real bias towards Hanoi because obviously I've been here for so long. I'm not so sure about other places in Vietnam. You know better than I do. I just feel like Hanoi is so dynamic. It's just so always changing. Even in the time that I've been here, so the first 10 years I was here, it just developed rapidly into a thriving sort of community, society, economically. I just feel like I'm always kind of on the up. And I like that kind of feeling. I feel like there's always. I always felt from minute one actually. I always felt there was another opportunity somewhere. There were things that you could do. There's something that you could network. You could connect with people. You could get into different groups. And I just felt that real sense of kind of innovation or energy or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And I didn't feel like that was true of Scotland. I feel like the UK in general is fairly stale in a lot of ways.
So
you know what I mean?
That's the idea of Vietnam in general as a developing country. It's just, it's ripe with opportunities, and there's exciting things. It's always changing. It's always developing.
I'll say as well, I think the thing that really stands out for me around Hanoi is that it has this real mix of sort of very, very old, conservative, traditional values and beliefs and sort of social dynamics and kind of hierarchy and all this kind of stuff, but also linked with this sense of dynamic development and economic prosperity, over the last 10, 20, 30 years, And I quite like that mix of different things. It's not what I always say is that if I went to Bangkok, it could be London. If I go to KL, it could be Bangkok. Hanoi is I don't know that I've ever been anywhere that's similar to Hanoi. You know what I mean by that? And I like that. I like how unique that is.
I always say, when I think of Vietnam, I think of Hanoi. Hanoi feels to me like Vietnam, unique, original, like the ancient kind of style. Even in Da Nang and obviously Ho Chi Minh City, those are like developing, modern places that are online with like Hanoi is its own thing. You feel it when you're here.
You do feel it. You do feel it. And also, I will say as well, I do think that Hanoi is one of these places where you either love it or you hate it.
It can,
there's really
it can be hard to leave. It can be hard to get out of here.
Yeah.
I think once I eventually left, I go, man, it's nice to be by the beach.
Yeah, right.
The sunshine.
Right.
But there is something about Hanoi that is charming, that keeps you here, that makes you feel connected to it. So I get that. That's what got you here for 12 years almost.
Yeah.
And you're probably not going anywhere, huh? You're pretty much set. So he's transitioned from that role that we talked about a bit.
Yep.
Now you're kind of running your own business
Yep.
now. So talk about that a little bit. What are you doing now for work?
Yes, I set up my own company here in Hanoi, really strongly linked to what my previous role was around training and facilitation. So the idea is to do training or facilitation for teams, whether it be corporates or whether it be NGOs, whether it be startups or entrepreneurs or whatever, around different skills that are linked to sort of social emotional learning competencies. That hasn't worked out so great so far. There's a lot more work I have to do around kind of marketing and positioning, that kind of stuff. In the meantime, there was, on the basis of the work that we did before in my previous role, it kind of broke down a little bit. And so that program no longer works or operates in Vietnam. So what happened was the Vietnamese clubs and the players and the coaches and the leadership who are so passionate about rugby, they love playing it, they love coaching it, they love being part of the community, they love seeing the benefit that kids get from playing rugby and being in that team environment. There was no avenue for them to be able to continue to operate. So I felt like I had some sort of responsibility to help, and so that's where Đại Việt Rugby came in. So we created a brand under the company, and so now we have the only sort of legal entity in the whole of Vietnam that's able to run rugby-focused events, because before it's difficult to run rugby events in a country that doesn't have any rugby structure. There's no rugby federation here.
Right.
So Đại Việt Rugby kind of works in that space of trying to establish the foundations and the kind of platform that a federation or a union would normally do. So we're community focused, but we have to figure out a way that allows us to actually operate, because the typical union or federation model is not a very sustainable model in a place where there is no rugby.
Okay, so let me try to break this down a little bit. You came to Vietnam, you started as an English teacher,
Yeah.
and then you transitioned into your role with Pass It Back,
Yep.
Child Fund, and from there you decided to open your own
Yep.
business,
Yep.
essentially. And so as a foreigner in Vietnam, most people think of, well, the only thing I can do is teach English.
Yeah.
So anybody can come here and start a business, right? So a lot of people come here and open a bar, open a coffee shop.
Yep.
Those are all possibilities. But you can open a business
Yep.
doing anything if it serves some value, right? So you started a business,
Yep.
and you were doing a lot of work in Vietnamese language, right? You're working with Vietnamese companies.
Yeah. Almost all my work is
Right. So
almost all, not all of it, but almost.
so you're
all my
kind
work.
of like, would you say like a consultant almost?
I mean, you could
Kind of.
you could call it a consultant, but I don't really like that term.
Probably a weird term, consultant. But basically, you're working with Vietnamese companies and you're speaking to them in Vietnamese, and you're trying to give
Yep.
them kind of business expertise.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
So that's the company that you're able to establish
Yeah.
here. Now, under that branch
Yeah.
is this kind of new organization, Đại Việt,
Yeah.
which is what's really going to spread rugby.
Yeah.
And so, like, even if you don't care about rugby, if that's not interesting to you,
Yeah.
I think the idea of it is cool, because
Yeah.
what we have here is a sport that Johnny and I both love, but it's foreigners play it. Vietnamese people never heard of it. But there's been clubs in Vietnam playing rugby for more than 20 years.
Yep.
Right? And so a lot of people will be surprised to hear that we even have rugby in Vietnam. But we've had two teams for a long time. Da Nang just became the third rugby team a couple years ago. And so now what we're trying to do is create a federation, create like a domestic league.
Yeah.
Always we're trying to get more and more Vietnamese people interested and aware about it. And then potentially having a national team that can play against those other countries. These are all exciting things that Đại Việt is working on.
Yeah.
And you're kind of heading this up.
Yeah.
Right, because you're the one guy that's been here a long time, can interact with everybody using Vietnamese,
Yeah.
and you have the knowledge and the background to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So should we lead that into what's happening this weekend?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
All right, so this weekend we mentioned giant rugby tournament. Again, just for context, we play rugby tournaments all over Asia, Bangkok, Chiang Mai, Saigon, Da Nang.
Yeah.
all these teams will host an international rugby tournament, and teams come from around Asia, and we play against each other.
Yeah.
It's a great time. That's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
But you're trying to do something a little bit different. So explain the format, what it's going to look like this weekend.
Also, maybe interesting for people to kind of conceptualize why we have to go to Da Nang or Chiang Mai or Bangkok or Vientiane to play, because 20 years ago there was no rugby structure in Vietnam or Laos or whatever, right? So you have to find a little community where you can go and play, right? That's why we have Bangkok 10s for 30 years. That's why we have Vientiane 10s for 15 years, whatever. So what I think that is cool and fun, but I also think that it's not very sustainable. And we also know that it's almost impossible for local Vietnamese players to fund a trip to Chiang Mai just to play rugby. It's almost impossible, right? So what I want to do, and the way I'm thinking about it, is what can we do to create more participation opportunities for everyone in Vietnam to play more rugby, to referee more, to build more referees, to have more first aiders, so that we can do our own stuff in Vietnam, where we don't have to have boys and girls spending 10 million a trip to go to Chiang Mai or Vientiane or wherever, right? Because you have to pay to do that, and you have to. Sometimes you can. It's really great fun. I love doing it myself, but it's not sustainable or affordable for everyone.
Right. So again, just for context, so the style of rugby we play, the team is mostly foreigners.
Yeah.
And we're constantly having to travel to different places. But that's flights, that's hotels, that's tournament entry fees, and sometimes a lot of even the foreigner players that are making a good wage as English teachers or whatever, they say, "Sorry guys, I want to go, but I can't afford it this time." And so obviously the local Vietnamese players, they're not going to be able to afford that.
Yeah.
So we're trying to make a structured competition within Vietnam that's more reasonable for everybody to be able to take part in.
Yeah.
It's super exciting. You're the right man for the job, so that's good that somebody's finally doing something about it. What you did for this weekend, kind of explain that a little bit. So normally a rugby tournament is a rugby tournament. 10 teams show up, you play rugby, drink some beers afterwards, you go home. And it's a great time. There's not really anything I can complain about with that structure. But you're trying to do something different. You're trying to make this more of an event that's going to get more of the local people to come out, because most people don't care about rugby.
No, they don't care.
So if you said, "Hey, we have a rugby tournament," they're like, "We don't know what that is."
They never come.
But if you're like, "Hey, we have a rugby tournament with food and drinks and a live band and a DJ, and it's going to be a party," come out and check it out. Then you're going to get a lot more exposure to things.
Yes.
So what's the idea there?
So I knew that because I knew that we had to do something a little bit different, because the normal kind of social rugby, like 10-a-side competition, it's cool and it's fun, but it's a very specific type of rugby activity, And we at the moment, we don't have any money. We can't really afford to do something that doesn't really have a long-term vision, or doesn't really kind of contribute to a longer-term strategy. So I had to think about, how can I make this in a sort of business plan and a business, or how can I make this in a business model? And so I looked at a couple of different things, and what I decided to do was to, instead of doing a social rugby competition where nobody comes down,
except for the players.
Except for the players, right? We have the players, we have the teams, which is brilliant, and it's really good fun, and that we've done that successfully in the past. But if we're thinking about how do we grow the game in Vietnam, how do we develop players, how do we create a player base, how do we establish more teams, how do we create a league structure, we have to do it differently, because if we don't, then we won't have any money to do any more work, right? So with the Hanoi 10s, we're positioning Hanoi 10s as a sort of mini festival almost. One day event, but it's not just rugby, it's a festival, right? So we have the rugby going on, and even if you don't care about rugby, you don't even know what rugby is, you should still come down, because it's going to be a fun day anyway. You're going to have, like you said, we've got food and drinks vendors, we've got a cocktail bar, we've got a beer garden, you've got DJs playing vinyl records from 12 in the afternoon. We've got a very special Vietnamese band that fuses traditional Vietnamese, northern Vietnamese like sounds and styles into or with like electronic, like contemporary music. Really cool, very different. Just a really different experience for a lot of people in Hanoi. Haven't ever seen them or heard of them, and certainly none of the international people who are coming over will know who they are. But they have a very distinct experience when they come to Hanoi Tens. And we have another DJ that's going to close us out for the rest of the night, and it's going to be a good party, really good fun, and everyone's going to have a great